Before any avenue existed, before concrete, before a name, this place was silence, broken only by the wind, the sea, and the dense forest. Where today one of the most famous cities on the planet stands, indigenous peoples lived in balance with the land, fishing, hunting, cultivating, and sharing the territory. There was no private property, no walls, no accumulated wealth. Guanabara Bay was simply a place of life, not a strategic point. But this silence was living on borrowed time, because the world on the other side of the ocean was already moving toward these waters, driven by ambition, power, and conquest. On January 1st, 1502, Portuguese navigators enter Guanabara Bay and make a mistake that would echo for centuries. They believe they have found the mouth of a great river and name the place Rio de Janeiro, a geographical error that would give its name to a city marked by contradictions. For decades, Portugal shows little interest in the region, but other eyes observe that strategic territory, that sea entrance protected by mountains, perfect for trade, defense, and domination. In 1555, the French arrive and attempt to establish France's Antarctique, forming alliances with indigenous peoples who resisted Portuguese presence. Guanabara Bay becomes a stage for wars, ambushes, and massacres. Europeans fight each other on American soil, using indigenous people as disposable soldiers. In 1565, Estácio de Sá officially founds the city of São Sebastião do Rio de Janeiro, and 2 years later, the French are expelled. Rio is born, but it is born under the sound of cannons, blood, and dispute. The city emerges already marked by conflict. As centuries pass, Rio grows supported by a brutal foundation: slavery. Thousands of Africans are kidnapped, forcibly transported, and unloaded at Valongo Wharf, which would become the largest port of entry for enslaved people in the Americas. The city develops at the cost of bodies, whips, and death. Every church built, every mansion erected, every street opened carries the mark of forced labor. Inequality does not arise by chance. It is planted, cultivated, and normalized. Rio becomes a vital economic center for the colony, especially after the discovery of gold in Minas Gerais, turning into the main port for exporting the wealth of the interior. Where there is gold, there is smuggling, corruption, and power struggle. Rio learns early how to live with this reality. In 1808, an event changes everything. Fleeing Napoleon, the Portuguese royal family crosses the ocean and lands in Rio de Janeiro. For the first time in history, a colony becomes the seat of a European empire. The city transforms rapidly. Banks, libraries, universities, theaters, and the press emerge. Rio becomes sophisticated, cosmopolitan, powerful. But this progress is not for everyone. While the elite benefits, the poor remain on the margins, invisible, pushed into forgotten areas. The city grows upward, toward the center, toward the elite, while the excluded accumulate where the state does not reach. With Brazil's independence in 1822, Rio remains the capital. Slavery, however, only ends in 1888, far too late to repair centuries of violence. Freed black people receive no land, no work, no support. They are free only on paper. With no options, they occupy hillsides, slopes, and distant areas. This is how the first favelas begin to emerge, not as a choice, but as a direct consequence of abandonment. The Republic arrives promising modernity and progress. But what follows are urban reforms that expel the poor from the city center. Tenements are demolished, families are forcibly removed, and the hills become even more crowded. Rio becomes a divided city where beauty exists side by side with misery. Throughout the 20th century, Rio consolidates itself as a symbol of Brazil. It becomes the stage for culture, samba, radio, cinema, and football. The image of the city is sold to the world as a tropical paradise. But behind the music and landscapes, a harsh reality grows in the outskirts. The loss of capital status in 1960 with the transfer to Brasilia creates a deep political and economic vacuum. Rio loses power, investment, and federal attention. This abandonment opens space for other forces to occupy territories forgotten by the state. During the military dictatorship, repression concentrates on the asphalt, while the hills remain invisible. In this environment, a new dynamic emerges inside prisons. Political prisoners and common criminals share the same space and exchange knowledge. Ideas of organization, hierarchy, and resistance mix with common crime. It is within this environment that the foundations of organized crime in Rio de Janeiro are formed. At the same time, drug trafficking begins to expand during the 1970s and 1980s, finding fertile ground in abandoned favelas where there is no presence of the state, only its absence. Weapons enter easily, drugs circulate, and parallel power establishes itself. Trafficking occupies the space left by the government, offering protection, money, and its own rules. The hill becomes territory. Territory becomes dispute. Violence intensifies. Criminal factions form. Internal wars explode, and the population is trapped in the crossfire. In the 1990s, Rio enters a spiral of violence that reaches international headlines. Mass robberies, shootouts, kidnappings, and armed confrontations become part of daily life. The city lives under constant tension. The state responds with increasingly violent police operations, often poorly planned, affecting residents more than criminals. Distrust grows. Fear spreads. Rio begins to live with a permanent sense of undeclared war. At the same time, militias formed by former police officers and security agents emerge, expelling traffickers and taking control of territories, charging fees, exploiting services, and establishing a new form of armed power. Crime changes its face, but it does not disappear. In the 2000s, Rio attempts to reinvent itself. It hosts major events such as the Pan American Games, the World Cup, and the Olympic Games. Pacification projects promise to reclaim territories dominated by trafficking. For a time, there is hope. Some areas experience relief, but lack of continuity, corruption, political interests, and abandonment cause many of these projects to collapse. Violence returns, often more complex than before. Rio remains divided between postcard image and reality. Today, Rio de Janeiro is a city of extreme contrasts. Beauty and fear coexist on the same street. Luxury and poverty face each other just meters apart. It is a city that carries the marks of its history on its body. Nothing in Rio happened by accident. Every occupied hill, every conflict, every inequality is the result of choices made over centuries. Rio is not just a city. It is a reflection of everything Brazil was, is, and still tries to be. A city born from dispute, raised through inequality, and still fighting to find a future where the sound that echoes is not gunfire, but life. Rio de Janeiro is also resistance. It is a city that, despite everything, has never stopped creating, dreaming, and reinventing itself. From the hills to the asphalt, an energy pulses that cannot be erased. It is in the strength of its people that Rio finds its greatness, in creativity that turns hardship into art, in smiles that survive even amid chaos, In music born from pain that becomes identity. Rio is samba, funk, bossa nova, living culture spread through streets, alleys, beaches, and stages around the world. It is a city that taught Brazil how to dance, sing, and express itself. There is also a beauty that goes beyond postcards, a beauty not found only in Sugarloaf Mountain or Christ the Redeemer, but in the way the city breathes between sea and mountains, in the way the sun sets behind the hills, in the way life insists on flourishing, even in the most unlikely places. Rio is a wounded city, but never defeated. It carries deep scars, yet possesses a unique ability to be reborn every single day. To love Rio is to understand its contradictions, recognize its mistakes, but also see its vibrant, untamed, and profoundly human soul.